There's a quiet lie sitting at the center of retirement advice about housing. It doesn't scream, and that's why so many good people believe it. The lie is that a smaller home automatically means a cheaper retirement. It sounds responsible, practical, even wise, and sometimes it is, but not always. Here's the thing. The real question isn't whether downsizing looks cheaper on paper. It's whether downsizing actually improves your monthly life, your cash flow, and your peace of mind. Those are not always the same thing, and that gap catches people quietly. Imagine walking onto a car lot. Every vehicle has a sticker price, bold and official, almost daring you to believe that number is final. But nobody pays just the sticker because there are fees, taxes, add-ons, and surprises waiting at the desk. Downsizing works the same way for a lot of retirees. While we're on the topic, if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect moment. You won't regret it. I make videos for people who want less noise and more clarity. And retirement gets a whole lot easier when things finally make sense. Let me tell you about Barbara. She's 67, a retired school secretary, living in a modest paid-off ranch house she's owned for 24 years. She has about $238,000 saved, which doesn't sound impressive if you compare her to the internet. But most mornings, she drinks her coffee slowly, and she is not panicked. Now let me tell you about Susan. She's 64, a former regional sales manager, and she has around $812,000 between her IRA and brokerage account. A year ago, she sold her larger suburban house and moved into a newer condo closer to downtown. On paper, Susan looks like the success story. But Barbara knows what money is coming in every month. Susan knows what her account balance was this morning, and she checks it more than she wants to admit. Barbara sleeps through the night. Susan wakes up at 3 a.m. and wonders if she made a mistake. That matters more than people think. It's not about who has more saved. It's about who has more certainty. And certainty in retirement does something powerful. It calms the nervous system in a way a big account balance sometimes never can. Now listen, this is where people get tripped up. They compare house size, sale price, and maybe the new mortgage or rent. But retirement is not lived in square feet. Retirement is lived in monthly bills, quiet worries, and the cost of ordinary Tuesdays. What do you think? Are most people actually behind on retirement, or are they just measuring it wrong? Keep that in your head as we go. Because a lot of what you've been told to measure is only part of the picture. And sometimes it's the wrong part. Think of retirement like two buckets sitting side by side in your kitchen. One bucket fills itself every single month with money you can count on. The other bucket depends on markets, timing, and how much you take out. A lot of people obsess over the second bucket and ignore the first. Barbara's first bucket is stronger than it looks. She waited until 70 for Social Security, and that decision quietly raised her monthly income for life. She also gets a small pension from the school district, just under $900 a month. It's not flashy, but it lands like clockwork. Susan did almost the opposite. She claimed Social Security at 62 because she thought downsizing later would take pressure off her savings. Then she sold the house, paid moving costs, paid closing costs, paid for updates in the condo, and locked in a smaller monthly check. Now her savings have to carry more weight than she expected. That's one of the biggest mistakes in retirement planning. People focus on the size of the pile, not the strength of the paycheck. Retirement isn't about how much you've accumulated. It's about whether your income can support your life. Let that sink in, because it changes everything. And the strange part is this. A paid-off house can make you feel rich, and a smaller home can make you feel disciplined. But feelings are not data. Real data is what leaves your checking account every month and what keeps coming in. Here's something to think about. If you found out today that you're actually on track, how would that change your week? Would you breathe differently? Would you stop chasing numbers that were never really your numbers to begin with? That question matters more than most spreadsheets. Now picture a suitcase before a long trip. You toss in the clothes, the shoes, the chargers, the medicine, the little things you swear don't take up space. Then you try to zip it shut and realize the problem was never one big item. It was all the small stuff you barely noticed. That's how downsizing costs show up. The realtor fees, the repairs before listing, the movers, the new furniture, the storage unit, the utility hookups, the inspections. Sometimes you replace a low-cost house with higher insurance, a monthly HOA, and property taxes that barely drop at all. The suitcase looked smaller, but it got heavier. Then inflation starts doing what it always does. It creeps, it nudges, it silently erodes the assumptions you made when you first ran the numbers. A condo fee that seemed manageable at 64 can look very different at 74. A rent payment that seemed temporary can keep rising long after your moving boxes are gone. Social Security at least has cost of living adjustments, what people call COLA. That just means your check can rise over time to help with higher prices. It won't fix everything, but it does act like a slow umbrella in a steady rain. Rent and HOA fees do not care about your umbrella. This is why timing matters so much. If you cut your guaranteed income by claiming Social Security too early, then take on housing costs that can keep rising, you may have quietly boxed yourself in. You thought you were simplifying. But what you really did was trade flexibility for a smaller closet. Here's a question for the married folks. Have you and your spouse ever actually talked about what happens if one of you is gone? Most people avoid that conversation. Not because they're careless, but because it feels heavy. Still, retirement gets much safer when you look at the hard stuff early. Imagine 2 flashlights in the same room. When both are on, the room feels bright and safe. When one goes out, the room changes fast, and the corners feel bigger than they used to. That's what survivor planning is like for couples. If one spouse dies, one Social Security check usually disappears. The surviving spouse keeps the larger one, but not both full checks. So if your downsizing plan only works while both incomes are there, it may not be a strong plan at all. A smaller home does not automatically fix a smaller household income. The same goes for pensions. A pension can be worth far more than people realize because it behaves like a private paycheck. If you have one, even a modest one, don't treat it like background noise. Treat it like one of the strongest beams holding up your retirement roof. Barbara understands that. She doesn't brag about her pension because it isn't exciting. But every month, it lowers the pressure on her savings, and that makes her whole plan sturdier. Susan has more money saved, but more of her life depends on market behavior. And market behavior is not always polite. Picture retiring right as a storm rolls in and then trying to build a fire with wet wood. That sequence of returns risk, which is just a fancy way of saying bad market years early in retirement, can do extra damage. If you're pulling money out while your investments are down, recovery gets harder. That risk gets bigger when downsizing doesn't save what you expected. Because then you withdraw more than planned, and you do it sooner than planned. The house sale that was supposed to relieve pressure can end up creating a new kind of pressure. Quietly, slowly, and right when you wanted life to feel simpler. Quick question for you. If your retirement income was completely guaranteed for life, would you feel different right now? Most people would, not because they suddenly became rich, but because certainty is a form of wealth too. And that's why the million-dollar myth causes so much damage. People hear that they need 1 million or 1.5 or 2, and they instantly feel defeated. Meanwhile, someone with less money but stronger income may be in much better shape. Perceived data says one thing, lived reality says another. Barbara is a good example of that. Her house is older, her car is older, and her savings account would never impress a stranger online. But her monthly life is stable, her bills are predictable, and her Social Security check is larger because she waited. That is not failure. That is structure. Susan has more options on paper, but fewer in her nerves. Her condo is beautiful, yet the HOA rose after the first year. Her parking fee wasn't in the original mental math, and neither were the special assessments for building repairs. She downsized space, but not stress. Here's the thing nobody tells you enough. Downsizing can reduce maintenance, and for some people that alone is worth it. If stairs are becoming a problem, if isolation is a problem, if the house is too much physically, moving can be smart. But smart and cheap are not the same word. That distinction matters because retirees often underestimate expenses. Not by one giant number, but by 10 quiet numbers hiding in the corners. Higher grocery prices near the new neighborhood, more dinners out because the kitchen is tighter, more driving to visit old friends, more delivery fees, more little conveniences. The leaks are small, but the bucket still empties. Let me ask you this. If you could go back 10 years, what would you do differently with your retirement planning? Would you save more or would you build more guaranteed income? Would you think harder about where you wanted to live or how you wanted to feel? Most people, if they're honest, would say both. And that feeling part matters. Numbers matter, but how you feel about those numbers, that matters just as much. A house can be too big, yes, but it can also be familiar, stabilizing, and cheaper than the shiny, smaller place you moved into. Not always, but often enough to deserve real thought. Picture a tree being moved from one yard to another. Even if it survives, it goes through stress, root shock, and a period where growth slows down. People go through a version of that too. Especially in retirement, when routine carries more emotional value than it used to. Some retirees sell the house and then discover the new place costs more than expected. Others discover they miss the neighbors, the church, the doctor, the old grocery store, the easy drive to the grandkids. When daily life gets harder, money starts leaking into convenience spending. Stress and spending often travel together. And if you move from a paid-off house into rent, the risk changes shape completely. Your old housing cost may have been steady, but rent is a moving target. It can rise while your confidence falls, and that can create a quiet fear that follows you month after month. A smaller space is not always a safer plan. I want to know, have you ever compared your retirement plan to someone else's and felt behind? That feeling isn't always accurate, because the outside of someone's plan is rarely the true inside of it. What looks smaller can be stronger, and what looks bigger can be fragile. That's the lesson in Barbara and Susan. Barbara looks behind if you focus on the savings number. Susan looks ahead if you focus on the condo, the account, and the sale price of the old house. But the real question isn't who has the prettier spreadsheet. It's who has the stronger monthly foundation. And once you see that, downsizing stops being a magic answer. It becomes one tool, and only a useful tool if it improves the overall plan. If it lowers your stress, lowers your true costs, protects the surviving spouse, and preserves flexibility, great. If it only gives you a smaller address, then it may not be helping much at all. So what should you actually do before making a move like this? First, build a real monthly budget for both versions of your life. Not a hopeful one, a real one, with taxes, insurance, repairs, HOA fees, utilities, travel, storage, and a line for the stuff you always forget. You need the out-the-door number, not the sticker price. Second, compare your guaranteed income to that budget. Look at Social Security, pensions, annuities if you have them, and anything else that shows up no matter what the market does. Then ask a simple question. Does downsizing strengthen that relationship, or does it just make the house smaller while your income gap stays the same? Third, run the survivor version of the plan. If you're married, look at what happens when one Social Security check disappears. Look at what happens if one person needs more care, or if the surviving spouse has to manage the housing costs alone. A plan is not strong until it works in the harder version of the story. Fourth, stress test the numbers against inflation. Assume the costs you can't fully control will rise faster than you hope, because inflation is a silent eroder, and hope is not a defense against it. If the plan still works when prices creep higher, now you're getting somewhere. Fifth, test the lifestyle before you commit to the address. Rent in the target area for a month if you can. Stay there long enough to feel the traffic, the grocery prices, the parking, the distance from family, the rhythm of the place. You don't just move into a building. You move into a life. And if you're still working, even part-time, think carefully about Social Security timing before you lock in a lower benefit. The difference between 62, full retirement age, and 70 is not just a technical detail. It changes the size of the paycheck that follows you for life. That one decision can matter more than the extra bedroom you're trying to get rid of. The goal here is not to scare you out of moving. The goal is to keep you from making a housing decision that quietly weakens everything else. You don't need perfection to have a successful retirement. You need clarity, and clarity usually comes from better questions, not faster decisions. Because downsizing can absolutely work. It works best when it solves a real problem, not an imaginary one. When it lowers true costs, improves daily life, fits your health, and supports the income plan, it can be a gift. But when it is used like a shortcut, it often disappoints. Think about this. There are people with millions of dollars who don't feel secure. And there are people with modest savings who sleep soundly every night. The difference isn't the number. The difference is understanding. Understanding your income, understanding your expenses, understanding what actually matters. That's the difference between stress and peace. And once you stop worshiping the big number, you start seeing retirement more clearly. Not as a contest, but as a life you're trying to support well. So if you've been telling yourself that a smaller home will automatically save the day, pause. Run the real numbers. Look at the hidden costs, the income floor, the inflation pressure, the spouse plan, and the life you actually want to live. Then decide from clarity, not from habit. If this video helped you see your retirement in a new way, hit that subscribe button. I've got a lot more where this came from. And the more clearly you see your retirement now, the calmer it can feel later. I'll see you in the next one.